We got 7 different stories from 7 different media news outlets, you guys. It's time for another episode of Regan's Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of Regan's Newsround, where I cover 7 different stories from 7 different media outlets. And we start with The Guardian with the headline that the UK is accused of moving the goalposts on climate finance commitments. The watchdog says ministers reclassified the 1.7 billion of existing aid, but May still miss promises to poorer countries. Oh dear. Now, I know there's a lot of climate skeptics out there about climate and whether or not it's real, but we've seen countless evidence as well as expertise of the effects of climate change. And this government in particular are doing everything and anything they can to not keep for their commitments, but try to slow down or delay or dither on their commitments, whatever they may be. And this is another example of the government basically not fulfilling its obligations here. They're still saying that they're giving the money, but they're changing the phrasing and changing the numbers, playing with the numbers here per se, and this is really infuriating. It's really important that we, as like many other countries, play our part in supporting and helping contribute towards changing the country, changing the planet, for the better, for climate change. And this 1.7 billion really does matter, and I don't see why we're making it more difficult for ourselves. I know that Rishi Sunak has pulled back on some of his climate pledges. Obviously, we know all about Labour's £28 billion. Well, people say it's a U-turn. They haven't gone back on their commitments. There's just less funding for it. But obviously, there is still rightfully criticism of Labour parties there. They really shouldn't have had a number if they weren't going to be able to stick to that number. But Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives aren't really doing anywhere near enough when it comes to climate issues. If we want to reduce our emissions in this country, we need to have more wind power. We need to have more solar farms, and we need to ensure that nuclear power plants that we actually are building and the ones that we have are working up to full scratch as well. We're looking at the next 5, 10, 15 years for these projects if we want to ensure that we rely less on coal, less on fuel, less on oil, less on gas, less on these fossil fuels that are changing emissions, transitioning less out of normal petrol cars to electric cars. We don't have a proper infrastructure for electric cars as well. My parents have a electric car, and one of the biggest headaches for them is there are lots of charging points all up and down the country here in England, but they're all under different companies, different apps and whatnot. So some of them you have to have different apps for. Just things like that, can be a real headache for electric car holders. So they need to simplify, the ways for people to charge their electric cars, for example. And all these things cost money as well. At a time when, and I understand, where at a time when we are in a cost of living crisis, crumbling NHS, and you know what we're going through at the moment. I've said this enough times to you guys. It is difficult, I get that, but we still have to transition, and it is going to be a painful transition for some people. And we want to try to, as we transition more into more climate and more green energy, we want to minimise the amount of job losses that are done for those who work in such sectors such as coal, fuel, gas and everything. Transition them into a job that they can still gain benefits and are still financially secure. We don't want to put people straight out of a job. If they want to retire, obviously give them a decent package. Because we don't really want to put people out of jobs. We don't want to do what Margaret Thatcher did, and that is throw everybody out on the job market. We don't want to do that. No, it has to be a transition. Yes, it takes time, but we need to start it now. We should have started it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but not enough is being done on climate. And here, our financial commitments. Rishi Sunak is not really someone who is for climate. I mean, you only need to see what's happened with the Rosebank project that's getting the go-ahead. And by the way, we don't get a penny of that oil and gas upon the Rosebank project, not even for Scotland, who owns their land as well. and the sea, sorry. Ministers have been accused of moving the goalposts to meet the UK's international climate commitments after 1.7 billion of an existing aid budget was reclassified as providing poorer countries with environmental funding. The government's official aid watchdog that said even with these account-in-C changes, Downing Street still might not meet the £11.6 billion target due to the scale of cuts overseas aid budget. And I can just see some people screaming in the comments, but we have to look after our own. Yeah, we have to look after our own, that's true. Though we also have international obligations that we need to meet as well. MPs did not disguise last year that they were undertaking a reclassification of what aid could be regarded as contributing to the climate target. But this is the first time the Independent Commission for Aid Impact, the ICAI, has put a figure on the scale of the changes or passed comment on its validity. So I can't say that word. The report states, to meet the UK's climate finance commitment, the government has opted to adjust its accountability methodology, essentially moving the goalpost for achieving the £11.6 billion, adding that without the changes, ministers have had no chance of meeting the target. All these changes meant the government could counter an extra £1.724 billion towards the target, while the countries expected to support the ICF International Climate Finance Pledge did not receive any additional funding to tackle the climate change. The report also describes the reclassification as large and represents a 15% of the total UK climate pledge, adding that the government's reputation as a leader in this field has been damaged. The UK's £11.6 billion pledge arose from various UN climate conferences and was widely praised at the time as setting the UK as a leader for climate finance donations. It was the UK's contribution to meeting a worldwide pledge to mobilise £100 billion annually for climate finance, a global pledge first made in 2009. The UK made the specific £11.6 billion pledge at the UN General Assembly in 2019, saying that the money would cover the 5 years to March 2026. An ICAI report said the government still needs to find that 55% of the £11.6 billion in the final 2 years of that pledge. What's going to happen here? What I generally think is going to happen, this is going to be another case of the Conservatives are going to be like, well, you know, we've got an election coming up and we've got some other commitments we need to keep to, and you know what, we're just going to let Labour deal with it. It just feels like it's another problem, we're just going to let Labour deal with it. That's generally what I think is going to happen. It's another, like, kick the can down the road, let Labour deal with it, as opposed to dealing with this issue themselves. At least 2.6 billion of the pledges is now not due to be spent until the final year, 2025-2026, after a general election. Such backloading would place great burdensome pressure on an incoming Labour government's aid programme. The ICIA Chief Commissioner, Dr. Tamsin Barton, who led the review, said, "We are concerned at altering its accounting methods and identifying existing spends as the international climate finance to include that funding in the total, rather than providing new money. The UK is offering less additional assistance than was originally promised. It may also not be as suited to the needs of the most vulnerable countries at risk from climate change, notably the least developed conflict-affiliated and small island developing states." Yeah, a lot of small island states or countries are really suffering as a result of climate change as well. Ministers found the 1.7 billion by reclassifying core contributions to multilateral development banks as green, worth over £750 million, classifying as green finance and fixed proportion of 30% of humanitarian programmes operating in the 10% of countries most vulnerable to the climate crisis, £470 million, meaning no additional finances to the hardest hit. Something described as a scrubbing exercise found an extra 200 million in green finance. The report adds, as part of a reclassification of more of UK aid funding has been translated into loans rather than grants via multilateral development banks, as methods less proportionate for the poorest and most climate vulnerable countries. There is also insufficient transparency about the new accounting, making it difficult to hold the government to account for its climate finance commitments, the report adds. So they're doing a lot of tweaking to get around their commitments, is what this government is looking like they're going to be doing. How Labour are going to untweak this or whatnot is going to be interesting to say the least. This is very cause concern. This will be brought up again, I'm sure, at some point after Labour win the general election, which we expect them to. But I know there are some subscribers who are sceptical of climate change, and I was too at one point. until I saw it with my own eyes here and felt it here in the UK. It's happening. It is happening, and we have to keep up our commitments, especially for an economy and like ours. Yes, I know we have our own problems. Yes, I know that. But we still need to keep to our commitments, and clearly they're looking like they're trying to move the goalpost there. So this next one, guys, is regarding MP security from Sky News. So Rishi Sunak has pledged an extra 54 million for the security of Jewish communities and record levels of anti-Semitism. Oh no, I've got it mixed up with another article. I've covered so many stories, guys. Apologies. The additional funds will go to the Community Security Trust, the CST, a charity protecting Jewish communities in the UK, to provide security measures until 2028. I don't have an issue with this. I think there's a lot of Jewish communities up and down across the UK that are getting a lot of hatred and lots of anti-Semitism, and which is completely and downright outrageous, disgusting and immoral because of what's happening in Gaza. And you guys know how I feel. I think it's absolutely abhorrent what's happening over there. You know, the losses of life. We've talked about this all the time, and we're going to keep talking about it until hopefully a ceasefire comes at some point, and because we need one for the bloodshed to stop. However, blaming Jewish communities and Jews living in the UK does not change anything that's going to happen over there. Shouting, hurling abuse, assaulting these communities and these people will not change anything that's happening in the Middle East. It will not save another child. It will not stop the ceasefire. If you really want to, write a letter to your MP, send an email, a letter, protest outside their office, but leave the Jewish communities alone. And that goes the same for Muslim communities as well, from the opposite end. This is not helping anyone, and it's quite a shame that the Prime Minister is pledging money to ensure the security of these communities. They shouldn't have to feel threatened and feel the need just because of who they are. I remember I covered a story a while back about a mother who had to cover her child with their cover everything that basically represents the child as a Jewish, and herself had to cover up because they didn't want people in the area to know that they were Jewish, because if they did, they were feared of being assaulted because other Jews have been assaulted in their area. And this is every time they go to and from the school that they go to as well. So they live in fear, essentially, which is horrible. They shouldn't have to live in fear. They should be able to freely walk the streets. And if they want to showcase that they are proud Jewish, they should be all right with that. Then they shouldn't feel any hatred whatsoever to them. And it's a real shame that money has to go towards this as well. It shouldn't have to happen. And a lot of hatred and anti-Semitism has been riled up in this country. And we know that they're stoking up a lot of culture wars in the tunes towards this election. We know that's happening. We're seeing it and we're hearing it consistently all the time. But I also hope that there is plenty of money going towards Muslim communities as well, because they are also definitely facing threats and dangers as well. So a total of £72 million has been allocated to Jewish schools, synchronoscs and other communities centres to help them beef up security, Rishi Sunak has announced. The Prime Minister said the money would go towards providing security guards, CCTV and alarm systems at Jewish community sites in a bid to tackle record levels of anti-Semitism, which has risen since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. Of the total, £54 million is the new money and will go to the Community Security Trust, the CST, a charity protecting Jewish communities in the UK, to provide security measures until 2028. This is in addition to the £18 million previously allocated to the charity until 2025. Part of that, £3 million, was made available in October last year to offer additional support to more than 480 Jewish community locations, including schools and synchronoscs, and enabling 200 schools and more than 200 If I mispronounce the name, guys, I sincerely apologise. I should use Google Translate. I should have Google Translate here to apologise for it. To hire more security guards and increase protections. A record 4,103 anti-Semitic instances were reported to the CST in the UK in 2023. 4,000. That's now just bear that in mind. Yeah, that's what was reported That now, think about the ones that weren't reported. So that's actually higher. So we're thinking more than 5,000 here. More than, what do we think? 6,000? 7,000? I think it's a couple more thousand. It might even be double that. Because there are many cases where people come across it and they just don't, and they just brush it off and just try to carry on with their lives and not think about it. I think this is more than double, if I'm honest. The highest toll ever in a single calendar year, and an increase of 147% compared with 2022. The figures spiked after the start of the Israel-Hamas conflict, with 1,330 instances being reported to the CST in October 23, more than the 3 previous high monthly totals combined. Yeah, we've seen people. I'm not going to play the clip, but he's simply walking across the street and just gets a hurling of hatred. It's just disgusting. In a speech at the charity annual dinner in London, Mr. Sunak condemned the record levels of anti-Semitism as utterly sickening. He noted that the rise in racist attacks means that the whole fabric of our nation is under threat. The Prime Minister said, "Don't let anyone try and tell you that this is just a reaction to the response of the Israel government, as unacceptable as it would be. The highest weekly total of anti-Semitic instances came before Israel's response. This is hatred, pure and simple." Yes, there was it before then, and there was these instances before then. Yes, I'm not taking away that there wasn't these issues before the October the 7th. Of course not, but they have been exaggerated by what happened on that horrible day to the people of Israel over there. More than 40% think Labour still has anti-Semitism problems. I think we covered that in a different video. Mr. Sunak has not only denounced the assault of the Jewish people, but attacks on MPs, namely Conservative Mike Freer, who stepped down as a minister over fears for his personal safety. See, this is another thing that I've talked about before, about Conservatives being concerned about their own well-being because of threats from constituencies who are being... And I'm generally concerned that it's starting to get to a point where MPs are going to have less and less connection with the public and be more divided from them because of the hatred that's being fueled around. I am fearing that we're going down that road. Mr. Freer represented the largest Jewish constituency of Finchley and Golders Green, but faced a series of death threats when his office was subject to an arson attack in December and decided to quit. On the funding, Home Secretary James Cleverly said he would give those in the Jewish community certainty and confidence, and they will be kept safe in the foreseeable future. He added, "We are working with the police to ensure hate crime and expressions of support for the terrorist organisation Hamas are met with the full force of the law. As long as you are not comparing the peaceful protesters of Palestine with those, as long as you're not making that comparison, that's fine. Those who are protesting against for the people of Palestine are not supporters of Hamas. I know some of them go in disguise as supporters for Hamas, but the vast majority are simply calling for I simply want a ceasefire there." It comes as the government reveals a £31 million package with the aim of protecting MPs to avoid mob rule amid disruption and pro-Palestinian protests, which includes demonstrators surrounding the home of Tory backbencher Tobias Ellwood earlier this month. Yeah, so another thing that I wanted to talk about is this £31 billion package that Rishi Sunak is giving for MPs for the ride their security. I think it's a real shame. It's a very dark and damning day that they've had to provide security to MPs. I think it's really sad. It's a really sad state of affairs. I really do. That our MPs cannot freely walk the streets without the fear of being assaulted or attacked or hurt and abused, and I think it's terrible. It's terrible. They should not have to live in fear. I know it's a difficult job, and I know that that the public are angry about certain policies and certain things that they do, and I get that. But the levels of hatred that some people have for politicians can be very, very bad. And it shouldn't, like, as much as I hate Lee Anderson, and I really, really hate Lee Anderson and his comments and what he's been saying lately, I really do hate that man. I don't wish death upon him. I don't wish him to be assaulted or attacked. I don't wish any of that on him or anyone for that matter. I really, really don't. Um, and to think like that just makes you as bad as these vile people who assault and abuse politicians. So the moment you start creeping these in your mind, you're as bad as they are. If the moment you start thinking about that way, yes, I know life is terrible for some people who are watching this, and they've been made worse off thanks to the Conservative government, and I understand that frustration and upset. But don't. But if there's one message you can take from me, is don't sink to their level. Don't sink to their level, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to sink to their level. Don't go down there. You're better than them. Tackling anti-Muslim hatred, a Home Office spokesperson said the government also condemned the recent rise in reporting anti-Muslim hatred. We expect the police to fully investigate all hate crimes and work with the CPS to make sure that the cowards who commit these appalling offences feel the full force of the law. An additional 1.4 million was made available in October for protection and security at mosques and Muslim faith schools, bringing the total funding to 2023-2024 to 29.4 million, in which the government confirmed will be also maintained in 2024-2025. And unfortunately, rightfully so. We need to protect these communities. We need to continue to have our diversity, and we must not allow it to be put under threat by those who want to incite and hatred and violence among each other. I support the government's decision for these fundings and whatever it takes to make sure these communities are as protected as they possibly can. And whenever hatred and anti-Semitism has occurred, it must be called out whenever it occurs, guys. It really, really must. So guys, next story we have is from the BBC, but just before we do, if you can, or if you haven't already, please hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video, and subscribe because it really does help support the channel. What could the Tories be doing here? I wonder where they got this policy from. The Tories are exploring scrapping the non-dom tax status. I wonder where they got such an idea from. Who could they possibly have got this idea from? Scrapping the non-dom tax status. I feel like that's been a policy that a certain political party have been saying for quite a while now. I can't quite put my finger on it who's been doing it. It's almost as if the Tories can't come up with their own policies and they're stealing other ones to try and make themselves look good. Yeah. Let me just be frank here. I welcome the scrapping of the non-dom tax status. We know that that this has been a policy that Labour have been talking about for a while. I want to make very, very clear here: if the Chancellor does come out in his budget saying that he's going to be scrapping the non-dom tax status, that does not mean we give them a pat on the back and we cheer for the Conservatives for doing it. No, it just means they're just stealing the policy. And and it's probably going to be a very light-hearted one. It's just going to be to try and make people think we're cracking down on those who are taking advantage of the tax system. Yeah, I'm not buying it at all. Don't trust this man. Remember, this is the guy. Remember, this is the guy that really, really ripped apart the NHS as well during his time as Health Secretary. Remember that. So the Chancellor exploring the option of scrapping the tax status enjoyed by people who live in the UK, that whose tax for purpose is overseas. So non-domestic people, often referred to as non-doms, only pay UK tax on money earned in the UK. They do not have to pay any tax to the UK on money made elsewhere. Perhaps the UK's most famous non-dom is Rishi Sunak's wife, Aniska Murray, but 2 years ago she committed to paying UK tax on her overseas income. The Conservatives, including the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, have long defended the non-dom arrangement, saying that they helped the UK was an attractive place for highly sought after well-off people to choose and live and work. It doesn't hurt people. Even it's not going to stop people coming to the UK. It really is not. Mr Hunt remains committed to ensuring his policies don't undermine this. But ahead of the budget next week, Treasury officials are exploring a range of options to either generate more money in tax or reduce spending in order to be able to afford the tax cuts for millions of people. Scrapping the non-dom regime would generate $3.6 billion for the government, according to the research by Worldnews University and the London School of Economics. The made-up-to-date statistics from HM Revenue and Customs showed that there were 68,800 non-doms in the UK for the tax year ending 2022. Recent figures produced by the Office of Budget Responsibility, the OBR, has revised some down the scope for mass market tax cuts unless extra money is found. For months, both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have been strongly hinting that they want to deliver tax cuts. And I'm going to keep telling people, telling you guys and saying it. The public don't want tax cuts. They want money invested in their public services. Tax cuts do not fix the problem. People don't want tax cuts. The public do not want tax cuts. Yeah? They have no money in their pockets. Yeah? They have no money in their pockets. They want money put in their bloody pockets. Tax cuts are not going to fix their issues. So among the options to address this conundrum are cutting the spending assumptions in government departments over the next 5 years. To what? You've already cut them to the damn bone. Introducing a new tax on vaping and increased taxes on tobacco. That's not really going to do much dent in. Or scrapping the non-dom tax status. The Chancellor is still due to be present with more data by the OPR in the next few days, but he is not committed to anything on non-doms. But neither has he ruled it out. Politically, it is fascinating. It shows what a bind he is in, considering it an idea he has long rejected. But were he to plumb for it, it would pose a dilemma for Labour because it would amount to nicking one of their ideas and so leaving them with their own funding conundrums. If they also backed any tax cuts, the Chancellor also announced what they are expected to. It is expected Labour's message at next week's budget will be a familiar refrain of asking voters if they feel better off at the last general election, or even back in 2010 when the Conservatives came to power. They believe most people will answer that with a no, and whether the Chancellor is able to promise. He can't promise. You can't trust this Chancellor. I still think, regardless, even if the Conservatives announce it, Labour it depends on the wording and how they would implement the tax status as well. I think we should take that into account as well. I generally think it's a means to try and they're desperately trying to do these tax cuts to make it better off for their rich mates and themselves. That's how I see it. It's in no way, shape or form these tax cuts are means to help ordinary people struggling right now. People just can't afford it. They just really, really cannot afford it, guys. It's just it's just frustrating to say the least. He keeps going on and banging on about these bloody tax cuts. We're not interested in these bloody tax cuts. We want to know what you're doing to help ordinary people right now. And they just, all they want to do is just talk about woke and culture war nonsense. So switching gears here from this exclusive from iNews, guys. This is So short awaits, but billions in fees. Can private firms really help a Labour NHS? The private sector is to offer quick surgery and scans if Labour wins the election, and is predicted to see its NHS earnings rise to £3.9 billion a year. So, as you guys know, I'm a verminant. I really am quite. I really don't like Wes Streeting. I don't like that he's means to invest and use more of the private healthcare to help with the NHS. There are ways that we can get round without using private care, but at the same time as well, I also understand another point of view of why using it. But my theory is that, especially with this government and the people running it, and this man himself, who has already said that he plans to use private firms already. More private firms to help clear the backlogs. Does that mean that, let's say hypothetically, they do clear the backlogs and they do clear, or let's just say hypothetically they clear the backlogs, they ensure everybody starts getting that healthcare that they need. Does that mean that that they're going to stop using private healthcare to help with the NHS? No, of course not. I'd like to say that they are going to. I'd like to sit here and say to me, they're only going to use it for a while just to help clear the backlogs, and then they're going to bring it all back into public and state ownership, guys. Just you wait. I would love to say that. But I just don't buy that for a second. Unfortunately, private firms are here to stay within England's NHS. And I just feel like it is just a matter of time before it's just a matter of time. When it's going to come, I don't know. But I feel like it's just a matter of time before we are going to be paying out of pockets for our healthcare. Straight out of our pockets instead of through the national the NI that we pay through the tax. I just think it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time, and these last 14 years, they have literally destroyed our national healthcare service. The Conservatives have. They really, really have. Before 2010, around 2010, the NHS, the National Healthcare Service, was deemed one of the best healthcare services on the planet. Was it perfect? No. But you could get appointments very quickly. You can get your doctors very quickly. Any operations, any issues, you can get them very quickly. But you saw before even COVID, the last several years, there was always a story on TV or whatnot about the NHS being overwhelmed because they kept cutting the funding for it. And the argument as well that I keep hearing from people is that, but Regan, they're actually investing more money than ever before. That's money that's not even going into the NHS. It goes through it, but it doesn't stay there. It goes into private consultants. It even goes into private healthcare. Some of the money that's invested into the national healthcare, actually, that's supposed to go, that they say goes into the healthcare. We've invested this much into the NHS. Portions of that goes to the private healthcare. Private healthcare. Yeah? You do know that, right? Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, well, now you know. So there's actually less money in the NHS as well. It's so entangled with private now. It's just a sad state of affairs. But the thing is that a healthy economy can't work without a healthy workforce, and we have a broken healthcare system, and it needs to be fixed. People need to get back to work. People need to be able to get their medical appointments, doctors, GPs, surgeries, and whatnot. They need to clear this backlog, and it's going to take a long time to clear it. And unfortunately, I don't know how they're going to deal with it, apart from the private way. I don't want this to be done by the private care. But I just feel it's just really depressing, really, the state of our healthcare system. So from hip replacements to cardiac removals and ultrasound scans, private healthcare companies are preparing to detail new plans to provide billions of pounds worth of service to the NHS under a possible Labour government, the Eye can reveal. The Shadow Health Secretary West Streeting said that his party will be holding the door wide open to private sector entrepreneurs who think they can improve the NHS. Healthcare firms are responsibly enthusiastic by pledging to make their hospitals available to more NHS patients, the Eye has learned. But they also aim to build a strong string of new dedicated surgical hubs that could help them cut a 1.8 million case woe through the huge NHS waiting list over a Labour government's 5-year term, by focusing on performing large number of straightforward operations quickly. But experts have warned that the move could create more problems for the NHS, which would still have to pay for operations carried out by the private sector from its own fixed budgets that would then be left with the most difficult cases. Sally Gainsbury, a senior policy analyst at the Nuffield Trust independent health think tank, says that a greater shift to the private sector could bake in a permanent reliance on it. This is a problem, she said, because the private sector are usually unable to treat complicated cases, which can make up around a third of the cases. More than 1 million cases could be treated during a Labour's administration by using spare appointment beds and operating theatres in the private sector, according to Dave Hare, Chief Executive of the Independent Healthcare Provider Network. He says its healthcare provider has been buoyant by Labour's recent ideological shift in favour of the private sector. And another 800,000 cases could be treated in that time by 10 new surgical hubs that one large firm, Practice Plus Group, has revealed will be ready to open. This is all private. This is not public. This is private. The changes is likely to mean hundreds of millions of extra for healthcare companies. Annual private sector income from NHS is predicted to surge to 3.9 billion in the post-election year of 2025. Healthcare business consultancy Lanes Budston has told the Eye. This projection amounts to 9% increase in a year and assumes a Labour government that seeks to show it making a dent in the waiting list. Lang Budston's report, Private Acute Healthcare. UK Market Report says in 2022, the latest year for which actual figures are available, private sector NHS income was 3.1 billion. Tim Reid, Director of Research at Langbuston, which advises investors on healthcare in the UK, said Mr. Strean's endorsement of the private sector was still the best outcome that could have realistically hoped for. Yeah, for you guys, the NHS can't do this on their own. No, they can't. We're at a point where they can't do it on their own. And that's the thing that's really despondent. There is a full signposting from the Labour Party and its likely new government that the independent sector has an important role to play in reducing waiting lists, and an acknowledgement that the NHS couldn't do this on its own, he said. It could have done it on its own, but the same political party for 14 years has ran it down to the ground. Labour has been clear that it believes spare private capacity could be used to cut waiting lists and treat hundreds of thousands of extra patients. No one should be waiting in pain, while hospital beds could be used to lie empty, Mr. Street has said. He has also said he wants to get quite tough on NHS England to drive reform using new technology and encourage the body to be more open to bringing private sector companies into the healthcare. No! This is why I fucking hate this guy. I'm all for new technologies and stuff to help reduce healthcare. I'm all for new technologies, but we should not be encouraging private care. We can use it to help reduce the backlogs and that, but we should not be relying on it. I fucking hate this guy. I want those entrepreneurs to come up with cutting-edge treatment and technologies to know that when they come up with a great idea that they can deliver better outcome for patients and better value for taxpayer. Money that they're not going to struggle to get through the front door of the NHS, Mr. Streeter told the Eye. But Labour's faith in private hospital providers might be misplaced, according to Tim Gardner, Assistant Director of the Policy of the Health Foundation, a research charity. The 1.8 million routine operations and treatments on offer from private providers will still have to be paid for by an NHS with a fixed budget. Local NHS commissioners have had to think about a whole range of other services, including urgent and emergency care, where there is substantial growth in demand, he said. This is the thing. Yeah, because people don't want to pay out of their pocket for healthcare. Yeah, because we're all paying a tax, yeah. And the NHS obviously is going to be paying private cares to help deal with the backlog, which... So, and there's only so much that the NHS can provide funding for these private healthcares. It's just a cluster. It's a real cluster, guys. Same-day joint replacement to cut waste. Jim Inston, Chief Executive of the Practice Plus Group, one of the largest private providers of NHS service, said his industry could help a new Labour government from day one. Yeah, I'm sure you can. The industry believes that if the Labour Party gets into power, it will be serious about its commitment to reducing waiting times, and we believe that we have the capacity to help, he says. Depending on how much money you give them, but they won't say that. Within 3 months, we could recruit enough staff to bring down the costs to the price NHS hospitals are paid for operations. Within 6 months, we can increase our capacity significantly. Within 1 year of a long-term commitment from the government and working with other providers, we could have at least 10 new surgical units that would make a big difference. These hubs will be similar to the independent sector treatment centres from the early 2000s, Mr. Eaton said. Each of the 10 new surgical hubs will be capable of treating 20,000 NHS patients a year and could take a further 800,000 cases off the NHS waiting list in the 4 years after they are open. Mr. Eaton told the Eye that these cases would be on top of the 1 million cases suggested by Mr. Haig. Practice Plus Group said NHS patients would also benefit from some of the latest surgical techniques, such as same-day joint replacements, which will allow patients to go home straight after major surgeries. While the same-day joint surgeries are offered to a few NHS hospitals, Practice Plus Group is introducing them across its hospitals for NHS patients. Charles Akerlog, consultant orthodontic surgeon at the company Barlowbrough Hospital in Derbyshire, says such surgeries has its advantages. Evidence shows that people are more mobile in their homes than they are on a hospital wall with a bed, he said. They know they lay on their land better, and it's emotionally beneficial too, as they are surrounded by the care by their loved ones. Spire Healthcare has also plans to open 10 new surgical hubs over the next few years, which could be put at Labour's disposal. Labour has signalled that it wants to weave the NHS off private position in some areas, and is planning £171 million a year Fit for the Future fund to buy new equipment such as scanners. Last week it sought to publicise the plans to be paid for the abolishment of the non-dom tax status by highlighting the £1.1 billion the NHS spends on private sector scans between 2018 and 2023. In the time, the average price per scan tripled from £31 to £100, with total annual costs also trebling to £369 million. But private sector providers have told the Eye they believe the demand for their scans is likely to remain. They think if new NHS scanners are put into hospitals, their demands will be taken over by emergency cases, so there will still be the need for private diagnostic centres, which can deal the long waiting list for routine scanners. No, stick with the NHS stuff. Explaining his members' plans, Mr. Hague said they're looking to expand and bring in new services on the basis that they could be confident that whoever wins this year's election is going to try and knock the private sector out of the frontline NHS service delivery. Providers are looking at what their opportunities for the hospital sites, so specialist centres like orthodontal, I can't say that word, guys, clinics and diagnostic centres. They were prepared to build new surgical hubs from scratch by converting existing buildings. Surgical hubs are a good example of the kinds of service which the independent sector delivers very effectively today, in which the sector is perfectly placed to deliver more of the future, Mr. Hayes said. These hubs would focus on busting through large number of operations like cardiac, hips and knee replacements and other relatively simple procedures. And the fears of private firms would compete with the NHS for staff. But this news is likely to alarm sceptics such as Labour's Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, who says that the private sector involvement in public body doesn't get you the right answer for the public. Mr. Hague said privately run surgical centres would avoid many problems associated with NHS hospitals. These sites are highly productive and not subject to the same urgent and emergency care pressures as most NHS trusts, which can lead to procedures getting cancelled as theatre or deployed for emergency patients, he said. Private providers are also looking to build and run diagnostic centres away from hospitals so patients can have their x-rays and CTs and ultrasound scans closer to home, he added. We know the way this is going, guys. We know where this is going. Another obstacle for Labour's ambitions would be that NHS and private hospitals would be fishing in the same pool for a limited number of health professionals, according to Mr. Gardner. If you tried to go too far and too fast, you might not be adding value, he said. You would just be shifting patients from one hospital to another without adding any value. Jim Easton, Chief Executive of Practice Plus Group, agrees there will be no point in creating an extra capacity in private hospitals without attracting new staff. Most of my doctors are full-time employed and we don't want to be cannibalising staff from the NHS to set up new centres, he said. He pointed out that the independent sector treatment centres that the Blair government introduced to cut NHS waiting lists had to seek its own staff. They were required to create a great slug of capacity without deluding the NHS of staff, Mr. Easton said. That was the challenge back then, and the industry responded brilliantly and produced exactly that. Labour was contacted for comment, and so far I've not said anything. I don't like this cooperation with private healthcare. I really don't, guys. But I'm saying to myself, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? For me, it's about getting people back on their feet. I think that's the priority. You know, people need to be getting back on their feet. That's the main priority, guys. That really is the main priority. So, guys, we're going to take a little break here in between. We've still got a couple more articles to go before the end of Regan's Newsround. I've got... I wanted to make sure I turn this all off. So I've got a video, guys, for you. Funny one, just to break things up a little bit for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy this. It's from Foil and Arms. It's when you're asked about Israel and Palestine.
Israel or Palestine?
Sorry?
Israel or Palestine, who do you support?
Oh, well, I don't think it's that simple.
You have to pick a side.
You have to pick.
Okay, peace.
What?
I pick peace.
You can't choose that.
Why not?
You have to pick a side.
Okay, well, I mean, tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians have died because...
Israelis were murdered.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that they weren't.
So you're pro-Palestinian?
Well, I think they have a certain right to...
So you're an anti-Semite?
What? No, absolutely not.
So you condemn Hamas?
But yes, of course.
So you're anti-Palestine?
What? No, I'm not.
You're pro-Hamas?
What? No, okay, just let me finish my sentences. I'm just trying to say that I don't think there's justification for killings on either side.
So you're sitting on the fence?
No.
Sounds like you're sitting on the fence.
I want an immediate ceasefire.
So Israel should just put down their guns?
Yes.
So you are pro-Palestinian?
A ceasefire means both sides. Look, this is an incredibly complex historical issue.
It's actually quite simple.
Well, I don't understand everything about it.
Well, you need to do your research.
I've done quite a bit of reading, actually.
What have you read?
With The Guardian.
Propaganda.
With The New York Times.
Propaganda.
And this book from the library, An Unbiased History of Israel and Palestine, The Struggle for Land, Identity and Survival.
Propaganda.
I don't want to talk about this.
Well, your silence is deafening. It's clear which side you're on.
Oh, please.
Palestine.
Oh, okay, look, I'm Irish, okay? So because of my history, of course I'm sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinians and I support their political, civil and human rights. But I'm also sympathetic to the suffering of people at the hands of a terrorist organisation. But most importantly, I understand that peace in Northern Ireland was only achieved by the laying down of arms and talking.
So what you're saying is...
The Brits started it.
Exactly.
It was the Brits that started it all. Not, I don't. I mean, it's a bit funny, but at the same time, it's like really sad because it's kind of true, isn't it? Because we are consistently fighting over. Say, oh, so you're anti-Semite. Oh, you're anti-Palestine, and these rhetorics that come up is when people are just like myself. It's just like I just want the bloodshed to stop. I just want the bloodshed to stop. So, yeah. Funny, but at the same time also like a serious point there as well, guys. A serious point there as well. Hope you guys enjoyed that either way, guys. So before I go to the next article, guys, just a highlight, guys. If you want to financially support me in the work I do here, I'd be greatly appreciated. You can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p or $2.99 and leveling up membership. With those, you can get access to custom emojis, and you always get shout-outs whenever you're on my live streams as well. And if you comment on any of my videos as a YouTube member, regardless of which level, you will always get a response from me in the comments. Also, if you're a $2.99 membership, that's a Snowflake Corporal, you get early access to all my videos. That means the moment I produce them and upload them onto YouTube before they schedule out their usual scheduled times, you guys get instant access to them once they have uploaded to YouTube. So you get them straight away and you can watch them before everybody else. So, and those really do help, and being a YouTube member really does help financially support me in the work that I do here, and I appreciate every single one who has done so far. And also, if you wanted to get more content, if you don't get enough content here on YouTube, guys, you can also find exclusive content on my Patreon as well, and that content there is absolutely free. All you need to do is create an account and you just follow me on Patreon and you can get access to that. At the moment, I'm doing free videos a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, respectively. So you can get additional content there, and I can be a bit more sweary, a bit more ranty if I wanted to on them because it's not on YouTube. And if you also have access to Rumble, I know some people are a bit skeptical about the platform, but I also do at the moment free videos there as well. You can also check out the Rumble content there as well. Again, does not cost you anything, but you could also check out the content there as well if enough on YouTube is not enough to satisfy you. So thank you guys for all your support. Let's move on to the next one here. So this one is from The Independent. And it is with the headline that a top Tory calls for a police investigation into sexual blackmail allegations by a party donor against a female XP. The tycoon Mohammed Asmi accuses criminal harassment of a former Conservative MP, Charlotte Lees. This is extremely concerning. Now, there was a story I think I've recorded a while ago about potential sexual assault by a Conservative MP on a member, which we don't know who, but it's kind of been kept quiet. I suppose there's certain implementations. But this is just as disgusting and terrible. And there really is a really bad culture within the Conservative Party. But it's just not, the trouble with this, guys, is that it's just not highlighted enough about the troubles that are taking place behind closed doors. It's anything but a squeaky clean party. The amount of sleaze and corruption that we've heard countless times from the Conservatives. Peter Bone and some of the things that he's been guilty of, just one of many examples. Matt Hancock as well, being caught, the groping video that he had as well. I mean, it's pretty distasteful. It's very, very distasteful to say the least. And now we're talking about blackmail allegations. This is extremely, extremely concerning to say the least. Blackmailing someone against their will it's disgusting, abhorrent, and beyond. It's just no way, shape, or form is it appropriate. And this is very, very, very worrying to say the least, guys. So a Tory tycoons in a cash for access controversy accuses a female ex-MP of attempted sexual blackmail, according to a former cabinet minister. The Conservative MP, Sir David Davis, has called for a police investigation into businessman and Tory donor Mohammed Amsti for the possible criminal harassment of a former Bristol MP, Charlotte Leese. Using parliamentary legal protection, Sir David also accused Mr Amnesty of a misogynistic hate campaign against Miss Elise on social media. He has also claimed that Mr Amnesty had tried to intimidate the former Labour Minister, Dame Margaret Holt, as well. In a wide-ranging attack, Sir David said multi-millionaire Mr Amnesty was a shady fixer for corrupt politicians who had made his fortune by facilitating corrupt deals for dictatorships and autocracies, including Russia. And he also claimed that Mr Amnesty's libel lawyers, Carter Rock, has committed perjury by lying about how much Mr Amnesty has spent on his failed lawsuit against Mr Leese. Mr Amnesty responded on Tuesday night by calling Sir David a biased, bully, coward and liar, and denied the allegations in their entirety. He also challenged Sir David to repeat them outside the Commons debate chamber, where he would not have legal immunity. Nigel Tutt, the managing partner of the Carter Rock, rejected Sir David's claim, Mr Tate told The Independent. The judge found Mr Amnesty had misremembered his costs and there were no suggestions of any perjury. Sir David's comments come after a High Court judge threw out a libel action against Mr Amnesty against the former Conservative MP Charlotte Leese last year. Mr Amnesty, who along with his Russian partner, Nadika Wachovishka, has given £750,000 to the Conservatives and backed Boris Johnson's leadership claim that he had been deflamed by Mr Leese as a secret dossier. Definitely nothing to see there. Definitely nothing to see there. They fell out in 2020 after she claimed she tried to use his wealth to take over a Tory group run by her which aims to boost UK-Middle East relations. He has also donated more than £1 million to King Charles' favourite charities, leading him dining with him then heir to the throne. Buying influence. That's what this is. This is buying influence. This is a very dangerous person. Philanthropist Mr Armory defended his conduct as access capitalism. Oh, really? Oh, you didn't just happen to give £1 million to King Charles's favourite charity just for out of the kindness of your heart. No, it wasn't. It wasn't just out. It wasn't just for the kindness of your heart. Then, yeah. You're not fooling anyone. So David castrated Mr Armory for the way he fought his battle with Miss Lacey. Mr Amnesty's campaign went against her far beyond the legal case itself, and he set out to destroy her reputation, he said. There are lies that she sexually blackmailed men, the collection of intimate details about her family, physical intimidation, and an obsessive, misogynistic and ultimately defamatory hate campaign on social media by Amnesty himself. Sir David said Mr Amnesty is deeply immersed in a twilight world of backroom bribes. This is why he was so desperate to suppress Mr Lacey's claims, he added. He did not want to be exposed to have his carefully crafted public image, that of a savoury entrepreneur that generous philanthropist shredded. Amnesty clearly hoped that he could break Mr Lacey's resolve and force her to concede through bully, intimidation and the threats of financial ruin. He failed. He put Charlotte Leese through years of torture and what must have been amounted to criminal harassment. So David said Mr Amnesty, 63, had earned £7 million a year for a Swedish-based telecom firm and had aided and enriched regimes that reassembled a shopping list of dictatorships and autocracies. They include Russia and post-Soviet states like Uzbekistan. Amnesties facilitate corrupt deals. The repeat nature of murky practices involved in striking, said Sir David. Mr Amnesty had attempted to buy his way into the British establishment, and worryingly he had some success. He has managed to recast himself as a philanthropist and a benefactor, rather than a shady political fixer for corrupt politicians that he really is. It definitely seems to be painted that way, doesn't it, here, the more you read into this. He would do whatever he can to get influence, and clearly the British establishment is vulnerable. Well, we know that. There is a green-eyed gullibility at the top of society, with institutions happy to hover up cash without asking questions. Sir David Dramaca's Commons intervention following a separate clash between Mr Anstey and Dame Margaret Hold. The BBC reported on Tuesday that she had written to the Metropolitan Police and Electoral Commission calling for them to investigate into whether the Conservative Party had broken electoral rules by taking a £200,000 donation from his partner, Miss Roshavica. Dame Margaret said fresh details of the donation shortly before the 2017 election had emerged in a new book, Cuckoo Land, by investigative journalist Tom Burgess. She said Mr Anstey had offered to make a donation and had been advised by Tory HQ that money should come from his partner's account because he was not on the electoral register. Dame Margaret told BBC Newsnight the Conservative Party may have knowingly taken a donation from a non-permissible person. I hate this stuff. All this for influence and power is what this all is. The blackmailing is just... allegedly. Mr Anstey at the time was not on the electoral register, and if you aren't on the electoral register, you aren't allowed to give donations. If his money was transferred to a third party, that is also not permissible. That is a very serious matter. So he could face charges here on that as well, potentially. The Conservatives said they only accept money from permissible sources. Mr Anstey said no rules have been broken and that money came from his partner's account. He accused Dame Margaret of a politically motivated vendetta against him. When Sir David criticised Mr Anstey in Parliament in the past, the Bishop responded by calling the Tory grandee a liar, a coward and a bully. In the High Court judgment last year, Mr Justice Nickerton threw out Mr Anstey's libel case against Miss Lees, saying that he had failed to prove serious harm had been inflicted on him by her. It was hailed as a landmark victory by press freedom campaigners. She sent a dossier which raised questions about Mr Anstey's past business links to Russia to a handful of senior Tories and figures in the intelligence service. Mr Anstey claimed her dodgy dossier contained false information which damaged his reputation. But can you prove the information is false, sir? Can you prove it? After Sir David tax in the Commons, Mr Anstey said, David Davis made another misinformed rant against me in favour of lease and to promote Burgess's book. For the record, I repeat what I previously said. By using parliamentary privilege, Davis has bullied and lied about the true facts. If he has any subsequent proof about what he alleges, please say it to me outside. Don't be a coward. I wonder, yeah, we know he's not really going to do that. Every deal undertaken has magic circle advisors and blue chip banks. I deny in the strongest terms any and all allegations. All the deals have been subject to review by various enforcement agencies around the world, and no wrongdoing on my part was established. What do you guys think of Mr Anstey? I'm beginning to. I'm having a hard time believing him. You know, I'm just having a hard time believing him. You know. Maybe it's just me. It definitely doesn't look very good at all for him. It's very, very, very concerning to say the least. That is for sure. It just feels like this man is looking to take any and all advantages here. This probably will not be the last time we hear of this story, but it's definitely a scary one to say the least, guys. I don't like reading stories like this and all this backhanded and donations and the influence that this man is getting, and also potentially links to Russia allegedly as well. The blackmailing allegedly. This is why we need to stop political parties accepting donations. They need to do something about this. They need to have more guidance. They need to be more clearer. The future Labour government needs to clamp down on this stuff. They need to clamp down and stop people having influence in our politics. They need to do something about this. They really, really do. It's a major, major issue, guys. So two more left for you guys to go. The next one is from Open Democracy. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, share across social media, and hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video as well. Well, is this not the right one? Is this the right one? Hold on a second. Just make sure. Yeah, this is the right one. Yeah, it's just a bit cut off. So this one, you guys, is from Open Democracy. Protest isn't harassment, says the group suing the UK government over law change. Your human rights group Liberty says spotlight on MP safety had seen Tories vilify Palestine marchers. So we've talked many times about the Palestine protesters, and we're going to read into this from Open Democracy here. Now, like I've said, there is a minority of them that are supporters of Hamas and should be charged, arrested, and should be removed the moment they are spotted within, if they ever try to be in part with the crowds of these people of Palestine. Now, one of the things that I really need to make clear is I support these protesters in their right to demonstrate, to freedom of speech. They should rightfully be allowed to peacefully protest. And the vast majority just want a ceasefire. They just want the bloodshed to stop. They want the people of Palestine to be able to make their own decisions and forge their own destiny. This is a topic that's not going to go away until at least the guns stop firing, the bombs stop dropping, and water and food and any sanitation and everything that they need to live starts getting through Egypt into the Gaza Strip for the people who are so desperately in need of it. And it's just our human consensus to care about others here. And what's happening over there is absolutely horrible. It really is horrible, guys. And that's what these people are fighting for. They fight every day. Someone is out there is in that strip. They are dying from starvation. They are dying from hydration. They are dying from some of the bombings that have been taking place by Israel. They are dying every single day. 30,000 lives have been lost, and it is a horrible 30,000 people, guys. It's a horrible, horrible thing to know. And there should be more anger across the globe on this. There is anger, but I don't think it's big enough. You know, their right to self-determine has been taken away. And while here on this channel, and I'll make this clear to you guys, what happened October the 7th, and I've said this before and I'll say this again, what happened and what Hamas done were disgusting, abhorrent, awful and shameful in every way, sense of the third of what they've done, what they did in that attack to Israel. It's an absolutely horrific attack. It really, really is. But that does not justify Israel's right to kill up to 30,000. And these are not just casual. You cannot justify to me that this is just a simple case of casualties of war. A lot of these deaths could have been avoided. Many of these deaths could have been avoided. To tell me that this was just, it's just been the number, that the casualty numbers are inflated. There have been countless footage out there. There's countless footage all over social media, on Twitter and TikTok and whatnot, showing that the IDF have been incredibly careless in their actions in these operations. They really, really have. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu knows the clock is against him as well. The time is running out on him. The people of Israel are fed up of him because he didn't act enough, and also some of the hostages have died at the hands of IDF because they either because they didn't know they were hostages or that they didn't care as well. So the clock is ticking on him as well. Yeah, so let's read into it. So a human rights campaign group suing the government for forcing through anti-protest laws says people who go on Palestine marches are being vilified to stoke division. Liberty is today challenged by the Home Secretary James Cleverly in the High Court over a decision by his predecessor Suella Braverman to introduce new legislation to target protesters that have already been rejected by Parliament. The case comes in a week where protest rights are in the spotlight. Pro-Palestine marches are being labelled as a threat to MPs, and the Home Affairs Select Committee has called on the government to force organisations to give more notice. The public want the fighting to stop. Now, I don't see how are their marches causing, like, there may be some cases where some of them go too far, but the vast majority of the protesters, whether they are walks, whether they are in London, whether they're outside their office, they want the bloodshed to stop. They want the weapons and arms that we are supplying to Israel to stop. I don't like that they consider that. I don't like this at all. And the Home Affairs Select Committee has called on the government to force organisers to give more notice. How much more notice do you need? Speaking to Open Democracy ahead of the hearing, Liberty Director Aquino Hart said, "We're seeing both our fundamental rights of protest being undermined, but also specific protests like pro-Palestine marches being vilified." Hart took aim at the incredibly irresponsible rhetoric from senior politicians, where protest is equated to intimidation and harassment. Yeah, they're trying to take away your right to speak, your right to protest. MP safety fears were raised last week following chaos in the House of Commons over a symbolic vote on the ceasefire in Gaza, though some MPs have reportedly an increased abuse and threats. Campaigners warn that peaceful protesters are now being associated with terrorism in order to undermine them. There were legitimate concerns around MP safety. Obviously, 2 MPs have been murdered in the last 10 years, she said. You need to take that very, very seriously. I would also like to say that it is MPs who are radicalised who are at most risk from harassment, and that's what the evidence showed us. But to conflate the harassment with protests, which is what's happening this week, is really dangerous and irresponsible. There are laws in place to deal with harassment and abuse, and this isn't the same as legitimate protests. This is exactly what they want to do. They want to paint what's happening to MPs. They want to mar what's happening to MPs and tie it into these protests here. This is what they are trying to do. And the right-wing media will try to paint them all as those who are legitimately harassing and intimidating MPs who should not be intimidating them. They will say, these are the same people, these protesters. These are the same people, which is why we need to stop these protesters. We need to stop these people speaking out, being able to march and disrupting everything. This is the rhetoric. This is the line they want us to go down. Yeah. This is what they want to do. They want us to take us down this road, to tie them in together, and it's incredibly dangerous. In its recommendations, the Home Affairs Select Committee said more notice was needed ahead of Palestinian marches because the size and frequency of the protests is a burden on police resources. But according to the coalition organising the national Palestinian marches, the measures would further limit the right to peaceful protests. Hart also said the current notice period of 6 days is enough for police to prepare for marches. 6 days is more than enough for the police. There's no reason for it. 6 days is more than enough. Extending that will just restrict people's ability to make their voices heard. With this and any other issues, the point about protests that it is not about whether or not you agree. It is about our right to protest, she explained. Liberty was given the green light to sue Braverman in October after she used second legislation which doesn't get the same level of parliamentary scrutiny to allow priests to restrict or shut down any protest that could cause more than minor disruption to the life of the community. It shouldn't be the case that when you have to take the Home Secretary to court all the time and restore and all the... Let me repeat that again. It shouldn't be the case that you would have to take the then Home Secretary to court with all the time and effort and energy and expenses that it involves, said Hart. The reason that we are doing so is because the then Home Secretary ignorous his act of circumventing Parliament. The government previously tried to insert new powers into the Public Order Act in 2023 in January last year, but was blocked by the Lords. Liberty believes a win would be a powerful check on any future minister or government that intends to do the same thing. I do believe, I think it's Yvette Cooper who's going to be the Home Secretary if Labour come into power. I do believe while I believe she will be strong, but I also think she will be competent as well. She will have a lot more level-headed than what these Conservative Home Secretaries have that we have dealt with. Hart told Open Democracy that there have already been clear examples of impact of anti-protest laws that have come through the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Policing Act and the Public Order Act, which both give police more powers to restrict protests. There were anti-monarchy protesters who were arrested on the basis that their luggage straps that they were carrying could be seen as tools for locking on, which was a new offence created under the Public Order Act, but they were carrying them to secure their placards. We were also seeing in sentence last year the Court of Appeals upheld sentences of the 2 protesters who scaled the Dartford crossing, and those sentences were 2 years and 7 months and 3 years, the harshest sentence ever handed in modern times around protesters and around civil disobedience. This is a complete waste. 2 years and 7 months. What a complete nonsense. What a waste of time. The trial against the Home Secretary is expected to run for 2 days at the Royal Court of Justice in London. Hart told Open Democracy that while she and Liberty's team of lawyers are feeling optimistic, there is a level of underlying exhaustion at how this government is conducting itself and responsibility to the protests that are happening. A Home Office spokesperson said that the right to peaceful protest is not fundamental. The right to disrupt the hard-working public is not. Well, they're not disrupting. If I'm absolutely honest, I'm not seeing too much of the public being disrupted. What Just Stop Oil were doing was a lot of that. Were doing a lot more damage in terms of the public, but I don't accept that they're doing that much disruption to the public, in my opinion. We have taken action to give police the powers needed to tackle criminal tactics used by protesters such as locking on and slow marching, as well as interfering with key national infrastructure. We work closely with the police to make sure they have the tools they need to tackle disorder and minimise disruption. Like I said, I do think that while I understand the cause, these protests are just. They are justified. If politicians were serious about were serious about stopping the ceasefire, they would be. These would not be as rigorous and as. I generally think that these protests would not be as large and has not been as damning on. If MPs had actually generally united in part in the House calling for an agreeable ceasefire. I think if all political parties would, I think the tension from the protests would be much less. I think it would be a lot less. While and I would say that the majority of people know that we can't do anything here about what's going on in the Middle East. We know that we can't. But this is also about taking the more high ground on this situation. Yes, I've heard this comment so many times from people, from people's point of view, is saying that it doesn't matter. Well, no, it does matter. It does matter. Yes, we can't really change much what's going on in the Middle East, but we can voice our opinions about how we feel about it. And politicians should be generally voicing their actual opinions about how they feel about the situation. But many of them are choosing not to. Some are being subdued because they're scared and afraid of upsetting Israel government. And they need to come out and say, you know what, guys, look, listen, we support you, we support the right to defend yourself, but what you guys are doing is going too far. That's it. Is it really that hard to say that? Because I think that's what the Conservatives and Labour are so petrified of doing. I generally believe that. It's frustrating, I know. So guys, I've got one more story for you guys. This one is from Byline Times, and it's an interesting one to say the least. So the headline is, people in Ashfield are sick of hearing our community mentioned every time Lee Anderson makes a prejudged comment. Irene Ruddy, who lives in Lee Anderson's Ashfield constituency, explores his MP's effects on his hometown and the racism he thought was in the past. Now, let's be clear. I generally have not seen, at the time of this recording, I have not seen somebody going down to Ashfield, whether it's Politics Joe, Times Radio, whoever, just someone going down there and actually, not in a pub, like not in a fixed pub with fixed people, like literally walking the streets and asking people how they feel about Lee Anderson. Like literally put them on the spot, how they feel about his comments, and put that question to them. And I think that will say a lot about what the people of Ashfield generally say. I am going to take this story with a pinch of salt. I am going to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because there are some people and communities in certain areas who are big supporters of Lee Anderson. So that's not to say, now I'm not saying that Ashfield is racist in any way, shape or form, but it would not surprise me that there are people within Ashfield who are generally big supporters of him as well. So I would say I take this a little bit with a pinch of salt. This is an argument piece from one person, and they may speak for a couple of other people, but I don't think it would be for all of the people of Ashfield, if I'm absolutely honest, you guys. So the ex-mining town of Sutton in Ashfield was often a tough place to grow up, particularly if, like me, you came from South Asian background. Racism was an ever-present issue in my childhood, but I noticed as I grew up it became less prevalent in my area. The country became more diverse and tolerant, and in my adulthood, the majority of people in Ashfield would treat me like everyone else. Since the election of Lee Anderson in 2019, I have witnessed a reversal of the progress on racism. Anderson, who has had the Conservative whip, Suspended after claiming that London's Muslim Mayor Sadiq Khan allowed Islam to take over the city, has a long history of prejudge. This includes blocking travellers from using a park, being an active member on Facebook groups that support George Soros conspiracy theories, boycotting the England's men's football team as they took the knee to raise awareness of racial injustice. In fact, a quick search online of Lee Anderson's racism will bring up a plethora of news stories and incidents from both his time as Labour councillor and as a Conservative MP. In one such incident, when he told asylum seekers to F off back to France, brought back memories of people telling me to go back to where you come from. What has made it worse is the deflating silence from the Conservative Party. Rather than being reprised for such comments, Anderson was renewed with his role of Deputy Chair. By doing this, Rishi Sunak gave racism and Islamophobics in this country a sense of vindication. It is something that strikes fear into people like me who understand the devastation effects racism can have. There has also been a vocal backlash against Anderson within the constituency, which has been heartening. I have found great solace in various highly active Facebook groups that consistently call out his rhetoric for what it is. More recently, we have set up a Stand Up for Ashfield campaign, which is part of the MP's Watch network, to hold Lee Anderson to account and fight for a better Ashfield. People here are sick of hearing our community mentioned every time Lee Anderson is in the news for another controversial statement. Anderson's comments about Sadiq Khan came in a week in which former Home Secretary Suella Braverman claimed that the UK was run by Islamics, and when the ex-Prime Minister Liz Truss stood silent as Tommy Robinson was described as a hero by far-right activist Steve Bannon. Lee Anderson has refused to apologise for his comments. He has since described his words as clumsy, but they were not clumsy. They were targeted and specifically. He intentionally set out to cause division and stoke hatred. He has done consistently since becoming an MP. At times, the heightened of tensions around the issue of racism, I've always put myself in the shoes of a 10-year-old version of me going to school. How will I be treated in class? Will the racist rhetoric trickle down yet again? Will I have racist abuse hurled at me on my way home? Rishi Sunak must expel Lee Anderson and those others who have weaponised racism in the Conservative Party. I've experienced firsthand of how devastating it can be to grow up in an area facing racial abuse. I thought at those times were in the past, but it feels as if coming from an ethnic minority background is becoming an increasingly dangerous in Britain today. The words I've spoken about, we've spoken many times about Lee Anderson and specific comments, but for me, it's even if he said sorry and even if he apologised and whatnot and said and forgiven and moving on, they are trying to enhance and highlight this. The set that I've said yesterday's live stream on the Snowflake Watch. And I'm saying this to you guys now, they want to normalise this kind of language. They want to normalise racism. They want to normalise this language. But they won't call it racism. They want to call it, they want to try and paint this, that they are coming to take us over. They are coming to do this. Where there is no evidence whatsoever of this. There is no evidence of this. Yeah, it is nothing but conspiracy theories. That's all this is. And if you believe these conspiracy theories, you're bloody stupid. You really are. There's no evidence for any of this. There is no evidence for this. You need to stop listening to these people. You really do. Yeah? It's so terrible that people generally fall for this crap. It really makes me sick to my stomach that people think that there is some kind of hostile takeover of Muslims in this country. It's so stupid. It's absolutely pathetic. There is no takeover taking place. It's a made-up story. I really implore people who believe this stuff, please go out there and look for information. Please bring me facts and evidence to suggest this, because there isn't any. Please provide me evidence, because I have not seen any. There is no hostile takeover. There is none. It's completely made up. And all it does is stirs hatred, stirs violence, stirs unnecessary tension, turning us negative and hatred amongst each other. And we're not. Yeah? This country, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, yeah? We're all part of the UK. And at some point, obviously, the UK will be no more. But one thing I do know is that people like me, yeah, We care about each other. We're good people, and regardless of your colour of your skin, your nationality, your religion, your sex, whatever your background is, yeah? If you are a good person, I'm going to treat you well. And if you're good to me and I'm good to you, whatever that is how it should be. This premise that because of people's ideology or skin colour and whatnot, it's all nonsense. It's all hatred is what it is. It needs to stop. And the media needs to stop highlighting these people, highlighting this information, highlighting this all the goddamn time. Because it continues to stoke unnecessary hatred. This Conservative Party, these reform thugs, Nigel Farage, Steve Bannon, these people, yeah, are trying to stoke hatred and tension between us when the problem is them. The problem is them. The problem is Rishi Sunak. The problem is Boris Johnson. The problem is the Conservative Party. The ones who are sitting there, who are being paid by puppet masters like Vladimir Putin. And you're falling for it. And you're wasting your time arguing with me when we all know that the real problem is these people being influenced by them. But I know I'm talking into an echo. I know there's some of you out there who are just not going to buy it, who just generally believe this stuff. But I'm not going to buy into it whatsoever. I'm just not. I know better. And if you generally believe that, you're more than welcome to unsubscribe and go somewhere else if you generally believe this stuff. Because I don't want you here. I really don't. But people like Lee Anderson, you know, I hate the man, but I don't wish death on him. I don't wish any harm on him. But I really, really wish he could see from another perspective instead of seeing from his own. Because he chooses not to. Just like so many of them. They choose to believe this stuff. And you choose to believe this stuff. Unilaterally, with no shred of evidence whatsoever. And it makes me sick to my stomachs. It really, really does. Well, this was not the way I wanted to end Regan's News Round, but there you go, guys. We've come to the end of Regan's News Round. Let me know what you guys think of all the stories in the comments section down below. What do you think about some of them we covered today? I'm just about to sneeze. My apologies for that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below about some of the stories that we covered today. There's been a lot there. And if you've watched throughout the whole premiere, thank you for doing so. But if you found this video interesting, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media so others are aware of this video. And subscribe because it really does help support the channel. Or unsubscribe if you actually believe this nonsense and what Lee Anderson is saying for. Please unsubscribe and go away. But if you want to go one step further, if you're one of those good people, good warm-hearted people that cares about this stuff, wants to call this stuff out, and generally stands for positivity and belief and wanting a better world for us all, if you can support the channel for doing any of them, would be greatly appreciated. If you want to go one step further and financially support me, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or joining me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content there as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.